What does the Desmond Bane trade mean for the Utah Jazz, and how soon do the ramifications from this trade impact the Utah Jazz? Find out next on Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Jazz. I'm Leif Thulin. I'm excited to be back with you for another week, filling in for David Locke on Locked On Jazz. As many of you guys know by now, I'm a lifelong Jazz fan, credentialed NBA draft analyst for Locked On NBA Big Board, attendee of the 2023 and 2024 NBA Combine, Jazz broadcast assistant, statistician, and lover of college hoops. So don't expect all the geeky numbers to be gone, but I'll make sure to take care of you and tell you what you need to know about your beloved Jazz from a fan point of view and someone who's worked with the team. Thanks for making Locked On Jazz your first listen each and every day. And remember, Locked On Jazz is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube at Locked On Jazz. For the best way to help us grow, it's to comment anything below. Today's question is, what do you think the best outcome in the draft should be for the Jazz? I want to still hear, because that's a very divisive one. But also, who should the Jazz target via trade now that Desmond Bane's dealt? I'm curious to see what you guys think there, or if it's just stand pat and wait till next year. So let me know there. You guys have been engaging brilliantly, and I've been reading all you guys' comments. So thank you for the interaction. Thank you guys, and thank you to today's title sponsor. It's brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And today on the show, the agenda is simple. I'm going to go through the Desmond Bane trade and discuss potential ramifications of it that impact the Jazz, how the Jazz can use this trade to strengthen their roster in the future. I'll discuss how I think Lauri and the younger pieces on the Jazz, the Keyonte Georges, the Collins, the Isaiah Colliers of the world, are impacted by this trade, and how I think they're more available than they were prior. And then I'll go through some reports from Brian Windhorst on the Jazz that could sway the thinking for the Jazz, and it may basically kind of refer to big game thinking, like the old catchphrase said. So let's dive right in. So the first domino has fallen of the trade market, and we were wondering if there'd be a trade before the draft, and it's happened. And it's a big trade. It's not a superstar, but it's a very good player in Desmond Bane. And it's for a team that's trying to win now. And it's a team being bold and trying to win while their best players are youthful and not quite as well compensated as some are in the new era of the CBA. And they're trying to win now with a core that's youthful. That's the Orlando Magic. So the trade is as follows. The Memphis Grizzlies are trading Desmond Bane to the Orlando Magic for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Cole Anthony, and four unprotected first-round picks and one first-round pick swap, and that's what the sources told ESPN on Sunday morning. Orlando is sending the Memphis the number 16 pick in the 2025 NBA draft. It's 2026 first-round pick, which includes swap rights with the Suns or the Wizards, and it's 2028 and 2030 first-round unprotected selections, and the pick swap is top two protected in 2029. So Orlando sent a haul for Desmond Bane. And Desmond Bane's a good player, don't get me wrong. And that is a lot for Desmond Bane. So we'll talk about how that impacts the Lauri Markkanen situation, because you could get a lot for it. But at the same time, I really like this move for Orlando. And it's a win-now move, meaning they need to use the best that they can use out of Paolo Banchero before paying him like the star that he is and will further become. And it has nothing to do with the Jazz, but I really like what Orlando is trying to do and trying to maximize talented players when their most talented player isn't paid too much in comparison. I think the Spurs should do the same thing. I think the Cavaliers have arguably the best chance of winning a championship in the next year, because I don't think the Thunder can run it back with their same core, because they just don't have enough money to pay and compensate the guys as they should be. So it's a team that has the most top 50 players is going to win, and the Cavaliers have a chance. So Orlando's trying to do so and add another guy in Desmond Bane. Now, I think this is going to be something that's going to be commonplace for teams to do in the new CBA when they draft a star, which means it will benefit the Jazz when the Jazz draft a star. It's not an if, it's when the Jazz draft a star. We're going to get a star in the draft. Maybe it's this year at number 5. Maybe we trade up. Maybe it's next year with a Darren Peterson, a Cam Boozer, and AJ DeBonsa. But when the Jazz draft a star and they hit on it with the new CBA, it is beneficial to make a trade that's win now, because the best player, the most valuable asset, isn't paid like so, and that's when you should make the trade. Now let me get to why this impacts the Utah Jazz. I believe it makes it so the Jazz have more teams as competitors for top picks next year in the Grizzlies. So that's one reason. And why do you say that? Well, they have Ja, they have Jaren, they've got some nice pieces that I think are good. But if you're willing to give up on a young player like Desmond Bane that you've paid handsomely, that means they're really considering the reality that they don't have enough of this core. And I would argue that they're right, that they don't have enough with this core, and therefore they should try to get those assets and rebuild. They're a 48 win team. They were at 8 seed. They started off the season fantastic and slowed down drastically. So this is a team that I think felt the momentum turning, and they got a can't miss offer for a really good player in Desmond Bane, but they got a lot of picks. I mean, we talked about Mikal Bridges fetching 5 picks. You got unprotected picks for the most part coming for Desmond Bane. So the next question about why this impacts the Utah Jazz is, can the Jazz get in on the Ja Morant sweepstakes? Can the Jazz get in on the Jaren Jackson Jr. sweepstakes? Ja has his problems. Some of them are mental. Some of them are the way he engages with the crowd. But as a basketball player, and then injury is another one. But as a basketball player, he's fantastic. He gets the rim. He creates havoc. He scores. He passes. He's known to be one of the smartest players on the court. Reads the defenses. Is fantastic. Do the Jazz make a run at Ja Morant while his value is a little bit diminished? Do the Jazz make a run at Jaren Jackson Jr., who, he has warts. He's not a very good rebounder, but he's one of the best defenders in the world. He's one of he was the second to last year's reigning defensive player of the year. He won 2 years ago. And he is getting better and better offensively. Like that's a guy that I would take a swing on. I think he's really, really good. I'd argue he's probably a better player than Lauri Markkanen. And yeah, he's got his deficiencies as a top option, but how often is a guy like that going to be possibly available? So I think the Jazz could make a run at Jaren Jackson Jr. I see it less likely that they make a run at Ja. I doubt they end up with Jaren Jackson Jr. either, but some teams that are really doing the fire sale dig in and say, well, we got 4 picks for Bane. Let's see what we can get for Jaren Jackson Jr. because we're not going to be good in a while. And yeah, Jaren Jackson Jr. costs a little more money than maybe some teams would like, but I wouldn't be stunned if Jaren Jackson Jr. is on the move. And he's great. I love Jaren Jackson Jr. Now, the last possibility, and that's something we're going to discuss a little deeper in the next segment, but will the Jazz go big game hunting and go for one of them, meaning a Giannis, a KD? I doubt it. But is there a player that they go for and see as the first they see this as the first dominant fall and now feel the need to try to compete and see if that good of a player that pushes the Jazz out of bottom 8 contention with the top 8 protected pick, and they say, you know what, here's Trae Young, here's Jalen Brown, here's someone else, and we'll talk about a couple of those options, what the packages look like later in the show. But is there a player that pushes the Jazz into having comfort in doing so and saying, you know what, we're going to use our trade assets that we have and make an aggressive move as our team's youthful, and a lot of our better players are under tame contracts, and we can make an aggressive move and continue to build the team and do so when the CBA allows for more players to be on the move. I think teams are nervous. They're going to make mistakes in trying to try new things when the CBA says, you know what, you can't build a team in the same way. The depth is as important as ever. Youthful stars and tame contracts as important as ever, more so than ever. So maybe the Jazz do go big game hunting in a different way. And I think there is a chance that the Jazz make an aggressive trade because the market is open, because teams are uncertain about what the CBA is. And teams like the Jazz have the advantage of having assets of a lot of picks and a youthful core. There's not this weight of expectation. Some of these teams are going to try to prolong their windows and overpay and short-sightedly cut down their actual chances. And the last ramification that I think is possible for Desmond Bane being traded, as for your Utah Jazz, is Lauri is probably a narrowly better player than Desmond Bane. And Bane got the number 16 pick in the 2025 draft, the 2026 first-round pick, which includes the pick swaps with Phoenix or Washington, the 2028 and 2030 unprotected first-round selections. That's something the Jazz need to evaluate. Like, that is an enormous haul, and the Jazz could get more for a 7-footer who shoots similarly to Desmond Bane. Yeah, he's not a great at putting out the floor. Who cares? If you're going to a team that has the aspiration to win, they've got someone who can put the ball on the floor, and that's where Lauri's skill set is fantastic. Now, the question is he the second best player on a team? Is he the third best player on a team? And how much money are you willing to spend if he is third? So we'll talk about that coming up next, and we're going to discuss the weight of the benefit of if Lauri is such a commodity as seen by Desmond Bane's, what he fetched in the trade market. Is it prudent to deal him? As well as discuss which youngsters could get dealt for the Jazz And it may not just be the stalwart veterans that we've had in Clarkson, Collins, Sexton, that all we've talked about is them getting traded. What if it's a Keyonte? What if it's a Collier? I think it's more possible, having seen the trade market start to boil down with Desmond Bane being traded. So we'll explore all that and some more coming up on Locked On Jazz. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch Money to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. And it's just that simple. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at Monarch Money for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com/code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. I also want to tell you guys, all about Murdoch Chevy. Murdoch's have been in Utah for over 80 years. They're as reliable as they come, and his Chevy is as American as they come. Locations in both Woods Cross and Logan, and both are fantastic. They keep the up-to-date inventory loaded up with the great Chevy trucks, the Colorado and the Silverado. And if you're not looking for a truck, you want an SUV, check out the Tahoe, the Suburban, the Blazer, the Equinox, and the Trax. And you can go to the website to see all the latest deals, the inventory, what's there, and what the deals are for you. So check it out and tell them that you listen to Locked On Jazz, and they'll take great care of you. All righty, welcome back to Locked On Jazz. I'm Leif Thulin. It's an interesting day because I don't know if I want the Jazz to trade Lauri, and they'd certainly have to get a lot, but seeing what Desmond Bane, a player that I think is slightly inferior to that of Lauri Markkanen, especially when considering if he's the third option versus Lauri as a third option. And the second option, I don't think either are quite good enough. That Lauri should definitely be explored in deals because you can get that much. And yeah, the Jazz have tons of picks. I know. And at some point, we need to use these picks to, one, get stars in the draft, but two, use these picks to get an established player. So I'm not saying we should trade him, but you got to explore it. That's my takeaway from seeing what Desmond Bane got the Grizzlies. So Lauri's contract remaining is 4 years, 196, and that's a lot. So there are going to be fewer suitors because they need to really be a team with a rookie scale star to have Lauri be a third option, because you'd be paying two guys really heavily then. So you'd need a guy on a rookie scale deal. So I've come up with a couple options that are feasible. Or you'd maybe have one of those teams see him as a second option, but you'd need to be very confident in the rest of your depth. So you need to have some budding players that aren't your stars, but you'd have to have a rookie scale option type of guy that's really ahead of the curve. So I don't know if I trade Lauri Markkanen. So don't necessarily misinterpret this, but I do think it's valuable to see what he would fetch in the open market. And Desmond Bane kind of gave a litmus test of what the Jazz could expect, and maybe some more. Lauri may be a better value than the Jazz would have seen. So maybe the Jazz are going to get lowballed, because what I mean by that is essentially Lauri Markkanen didn't get to show what he really could do. He was banged up with a knee injury, then he had a sore back, and the Jazz were playing manipulative games in the sense that they didn't want to win by the end of the year. We were 17-65 for a reason. We weren't that bad. We were bad, but we weren't that bad. And Lauri Markkanen thus was impacted, and he also was truly hurt at times. And I think that the Jazz may get a lowball offer, and Lauri is better than the value that the Jazz couldn't initially see, and so they should be wary of that possibility. So let me give you some suitors for Lauri Markkanen that I think have a chance. Detroit is a team that's been tossed around because they have Cade Cunningham. They have their star. They have guys like Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey, and maybe one of those guys would come back. Maybe they go Ron Holland, maybe some two youthful pieces and some picks come back in their deal, and you have at least youthful pieces that would factor prominently into the future. I don't know if I see that for either side, but it makes sense at least. And then you get the Spurs. This is a spot that I've thought about deeply. They have Wemby, obviously. He's fantastic, way ahead of his years, paid under his ability. I think what you'd fetch back is probably Devin Vassell, the 14th pick from the Spurs, and perhaps a Jeremy Sohan or a another youthful piece, maybe a Malachi Branham, something like that. I don't think you're getting enough back. I would only do the Lauri Markkanen deal with the Spurs if I get the second pick, which they won't do, or better yet, in my opinion, Stephon Castle. That's the only way I do it. The Spurs could be interested because they want to capitalize in the time frame where Victor Wembanyama isn't paid billions and billions of dollars to be the most rare basketball player in the world. So those are the two that are youthful, and then there's one that's aging, and that's the Warriors. The Warriors, who are very, very interested in the previous season, they're interested because they need to max out the rest of the career of Steph Curry. And when the Warriors traded for Jimmy Butler, I was in the building, and everything seemed crazy. Andrew Wiggins out the door, and then this team advanced one round. They had to fight tooth and nail, beat the Rockets. The Rockets were probably better than we gave them credit for, but they weren't that great. And the Rockets needed some retooling, and the Warriors had to fight tooth and nail, and then unceremoniously were flushed out of the playoffs by the T-Wolves. I also kind of believe that they're going to be a suitor because it's going to be a desperation move, and I think you need some spacing to complement that of Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green's excellence, which is not shooting. And I think someone like Lauri Markkanen fits in very well there. They may overpay. The Jazz should certainly listen to offers from the Warriors, but it's a totally different type of offer than the one that I think is monetarily making the most sense from teams like the Spurs or the Pistons. So additionally, the other thing that comes to mind, and I teased this a couple times, now that this deal's been made and we see what the trade market's like, is I think there's some younger pieces that may not have a defined pecking order on the Jazz. And what I mean by that, they showcased ability, but you don't know which player the team prioritizes more. So Isaiah Collier and Keyonte George, for example, I don't know which one the team prioritizes keeping more highly and what one fetches more money and more attention and better trade assets back for. Like, if you were to ask any given team, I think you could get a different answer. Collier's deficiency is he can't shoot. You got to shoot in today's league. Keyonte George is an inconsistent player who has not proven the ability to play a point guard despite being defensively inept. So my hunch is that Isaiah Collier is seen as better by the league, but Jazz might be confident in the sense that Keyonte George has scored 17 points a game, whereas Collier, someone had to get assists, someone had to push the pace and score the basketball in those games where the Jazz weren't really winning. So maybe Keontae's season-long steadiness, and you may say inconsistent, he's shooting the ball, but he scored consistently for 2 straight seasons in the NBA, is more coveted. So why I bring that up? I think the Jazz are a little bit redundant. They got to choose, and especially because Clarkson and Colin Sexton were also in the mix, it makes the choosing more and more important between those youngsters to define the roles. But I could see a world where, we expect that Collins, Clarkson, and Sexton all get dealt, or maybe some of them get dealt. But maybe it's, you know what, we're going to shoot our shot, try to solidify our roster really well, and a Colin Sexton is really important to another team. Maybe someone says, you know what, I don't know if he'll be amazing quite yet, but we're not quite ready to compete. So let's go get Keyonte George's scoring attributes and his the testimonials for how hard he works, how much of a basketball junkie he is, allures me to make a trade for Keyonte George. I could see one of those teams making a move for the Jazz, and the Jazz listening, because they're going to have to make decisions, and maybe it makes these decisions easier, and the Jazz can get something back that they think is more valuable down the road. So my prediction is one of the youthful pieces, be it Flip, be it Key, be it Collier, is going to be traded, along with a couple of the Sexton, Collins, Clarksons. And the last thing that came to my mind regarding Jazz trades that seem to be circulating Twitter, but also make sense and make more sense now after seeing Desmond Bane being dealt, is does Walker Kessler become a win now piece? And everyone talks about the Lakers because they need a center and they played small ball and they were outdone. But does Walker Kessler become a piece that is such a win now piece that with a relatively tame contract, teams are going to give you a ton to get? And if that happens, do the Jazz take a center at 5, Common Malawach? We've seen Tony Jones, who I greatly respect, and I'm excited to have on this show. He'll be on Thursday, and Andy Larson will be on Wednesday this upcoming week. But Tony Jones has talked about Malawach factoring into the equation even before trading Walker Kessler. I don't think trading Kessler is going to happen, but I'm wondering if some team's willing to make a move for a guy like Desmond Bane, who's better than Walker Kessler, but Walker Kessler is pretty rare. He might even be ahead of Jalen Duren. He might be ahead of other guys in that draft class. Is it possible that you see him being coveted so greatly that the Jazz get an irresistible package. And then the Jazz feel like they can replenish their store by going for a common model watch. The Jazz feel like they are in no need to have a Walker Kessler as compared to what they can do with the 5th pick and whatever they get back for Walker Kessler, which is likely more picks. So I'm curious about all that. I think the Lauri one's the most interesting part of the discussion. The Kessler rumor is going to heat up. My gut is he stays. Lauri, I think you got to shop the market and see what you can get back, because if you can get some picks that are unprotected in years to come, those draft assets, some people are going to say, no, I don't want to be bad anymore and just keep trying to roll the dice and see us get a spot, and like the lottery gods hate us and all that stuff. Be that as it may, having draft assets and is a total blessing, because the Jazz don't need to draft with those picks. You'd like to draft your star and be homegrown, but maybe you can trade, and those picks are commodities. And I think that the Jazz are going to have to listen to those picks that'll be offered for a Lauri Markkanen, that'll be offered for one of these youthful pieces, that'll be offered for a guy like Walker Kessler. I mean, shoot, Terry Rozier was not very good in the past season, but he got a first-round pick. Colin Sexton could definitely do that as a younger and more efficient player. The thing about Colin Sexton is, how well does he play in the playoffs? We don't know that answer. So coming up next, I got an interesting topic for you guys. We're going to sift through some of the rumors created by Brian Windhorst and talk about a quote he said today about the Jazz after reacting to the Desmond Bane trade. And I'll tell you who it could be about and my favorite trade target for the Utah Jazz. All that and more coming up next on Locked On Jazz. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. They have fans, you guys just have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. So if you feel like Tyrese Halliburton is carrying you all season long, and you got a fantasy team or something like that, or you just love the way he plays, how clutch he's been, maybe you take fourth quarter points. And if you've been tracking the game all day long, if you got a read on who's heating up and you say, oh, it's Halliburton's time, why not back it with a same game parlay? And so you could do that. And how would $200 in bonus bets add to the excitement if your first $5 bet hits? So if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On Jazz. Leif Thulin with you here, and I mentioned Brian Windhorst, who many Jazz fans are going to remember. He started saying, what's going on in Utah? And all of a sudden, Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell were not in Utah. And we are where we are now 3 seasons later, no playoff appearances, no top 3 picks to talk about. So you could say, has it gone well? Has it gone poorly? Who knows? Neither of those teams have won a championship. And yet I would say the Jazz, I'm not sure, have won the deal because the Jazz haven't gotten the picks that they expected by being bad in those years. So he made a trade. He made a point after the Desmond Bane trade that the Western Conference is very, very good. And I think that actually benefits the Jazz in a lot of ways. But here's what he said that I think is interesting and I'd be a little surprised about. He says, and I quote, there's not almost anybody in the Western Conference who is really rebuilding right now. Everyone's kind of got the gas put down, including the Jazz. He namely called out the Jazz. And the end of the quote says, the Jazz are intending to try to turn it up. So I'll read that again. There's not almost anybody in the Western Conference who is really rebuilding right now. Now everyone's kind of got the gas put down, including the Jazz. The Jazz are intending to try to turn it up. So my read is you got to expect he knows something. So what does turning it up entail? I'm not so sure. But the first person I'd target is not an all-star, but it's a guy I think can be an all-star, and that means you don't necessarily have to give up Lauri Markkanen. That person is Trey Murphy. He is my favorite player that is not on the Utah Jazz in the NBA. I love Trey Murphy. I've loved him for years, so maybe I'm biased. But is it possible to be made? And I think there's a reason. Even if you gave up Lauri Markkanen, I would do it because I would do Lauri Markkanen for Trey Murphy straight up. Trey Murphy, to me, has some of the most upside of a non-all-star so far that's played a couple years in the NBA. So he's not like a rookie that will be an all-star numerous times, but I think he can be an all-star. He's got more diversity. He's a big guy who can play the 2 guard, shoot the rock, play defense, and I think he can put the ball on the floor. I think he's a special player, and like I said, I'd trade Lauri Markkanen for him, but it may not be needed. And here's how. I saw a rumor that basically the Pelicans would be asking for one veteran who can contribute in the playoffs, one young prospect with potential, and multiple first-round picks. Well, the Jazz have tons of first-round picks, and they could choose which ones to give up. A veteran who can contribute in the playoffs, you could make the argument that you could give John Collins or Colin Sexton. You could even convince me to consider giving up someone else that's a little bit younger. And then he says, well, one young prospect with potential. Well, take a pick. I just mentioned a ton of them. Keyonte, Collier, Flip, they all had good years last year, especially considering the two rookies finished the season so strongly. And then multiple firsts. Like I said, the Jazz have boatloads of those. So there's a chance that if we traded for Lauri, we wouldn't be very good. And that's with Trey Murphy coming in. And then he comes to Utah, and Lowry's gone. And the West is so good that we still have our top 8 pick and someone with more potential to grow on the ball, a little bit younger. And the Jazz would be retooling, not rebuilding in that sense, but we'd still be in a rebuild with a likely top 8 pick because I don't think he pushes the needle to be better. And you'd have the option to keep Walker Kessler going for the long run, and you'd save a little money. Maybe you can make another move. So that's my preference for my top target. And that can make me stomach getting better and potentially sacrificing a top 8 spot, particularly if we keep Lauri Markkanen. But if that trade's made, I'd imagine they ask for Lauri Markkanen. But there's a world where they don't. And it's because the Jazz have so many draft picks that maybe it becomes enticing to make that deal. I don't know if it happens, but that was the first place my brain went to. It was like, okay, here's a youngish team in Orlando that's trying to win now, and they made a move that they think will help them win now, and will give up a ton of picks. So you can make the argument that the Pelicans have a talented enough roster, especially coming back from injury, that if they were to give up Trey Murphy and get Lauri Markkanen back, and also or you go for the younger pieces and no Lauri Markkanen, you'd be trying to build around Zion Williamson. I think you're better suited building around Zion Williamson with a Trey or a Lauri, but who knows? There's a chance. Now, so that's my preference. The bigger name that many Jazz fans are going to want to hear about is Jalen Brown. Jalen Brown, I think monetarily is feasible. I have my question marks, though. So monetarily, you'd have to do something like John Collins, Jordan Clarkson, and a Juzang or a Svi Mikhailuk. And that'll get you there in the sense of salary. But then you got to use the biggest asset the Jazz have, and that's draft picks, and a lot of good ones. And many of them, if you put enough of them, it may entice Boston into making a deal. I deem this unlikely, and I don't think Brown can be the best player on a very good team. What do you guys think on that? Comment that in that below. Do you think Jalen Brown, I know he's won a Finals MVP, but I would still tell you pretty confident that Jason Tatum was a better player than him that season. Jason Tatum took the better defender. But I don't think that Jalen Brown can be the best player on a really good team. But I do think he moves us beyond the top 8 picks, meaning that the Jazz are likely in a play-in spot and don't get a pick with the AJ, the Cam Boozer, the Darren Petersons of the world. But I could stomach it because I think getting Jalen Brown without giving up Lauri Markkanen is a good deal. I think that is a good deal, and then you can use those picks the next year, or you can use those promised picks to get another big-time player. And the other interesting part, and my friend Spencer mentioned this the other day, is he could possibly be injured because he's been dealing with so much wear and tear in the playoffs. He's had some knee issues that he could end up missing part of the season. And you preserve the top 8. You have a Jalen Brown. You have a Lauri Markkanen. And it's not the craziest thing to imagine that the Jazz still end up top 8 if he shuts down the season early or has lingering knee issues. So the Jazz have the assets to lure other teams into dealing with them rather than using it to build our roster. And that's why draft capital is ever so valuable. But at a certain point, the Jazz need to find a star in the draft. But it also is possible to thread the needle and get an established player and build using trades that use our draft assets to lure other teams into making those trades. And they'd use those picks to pick their team. The Jazz maybe could get a star this year. I think it's possible that the Jazz draft Trey Johnson and can be a star. Whether you guys like my Shea comparison, I think that's the archetype of he just puts so much attention, scores 25, and he can become a good point guard, and all of a sudden he's a multi-time all-star. I don't think he's a perennial MVP candidate. Or it's Devin Booker, Devin Booker is fantastic. He can really score the ball once again, a guy who's transitioned to a better scorer, a better passer and distributor because of his scoring prowess. You could get Shea there, and you have a guy. You have a foundational piece. You could get Trey there. You'd love to get Shea there. You could get Trey there, and you have a foundational piece, and then the Jazz make win now moves by trading their future draft assets to try to win while their team and their potentially best players are youthful. That's what I think is interesting. I think the Jazz have done poorly in the sense of they have not drafted well so far. Hendricks could be good. Cody could be good. But getting the 9th and 10th pick wasn't good. The 5th was unfortunate, but the Jazz were bad enough where they put themselves in position to succeed. It just didn't bounce our way, quite literally. This year is the telling point. Do the Jazz use their trade assets, which are the draft picks of the future, to make a trade and get a player that they want that's established in the NBA, or do they keep leaving it up to the lottery gods and the scouting selection finding the right guy? That's really going to be interesting. And I think Desmond Bane being traded, the first dominoes fall, and you're going to see more and more teams make trades that may appear rash, and some may be, because they have to make tough decisions in terms of who is valuable enough to build around, and how do you build a roster that can play the 240 minutes like David Locke talks about all the time. The teams that have been built with super teams are dead because you just don't have enough minutes, and you don't have a way to have enough good players if you pay select guys so much. The Jazz don't have to pay too many guys too much money. The Jazz do have a ton of draft picks in the future and could use them to find a guy that's established rather than, going through the crapshoot that is the draft. I don't think it's quite a crapshoot. I'm just saying that as more of an expression. I think the Jazz can draft well. I think the front office has a vision. They've got a vision. They added Austin Ainge, who's in it for the long haul. Will Hardy's in it for the long haul. There is optimism yet, but it is getting impatient. It's a tough thing to sit there and watch. If you're Ryan Smith and you bought the team, and the team's struggled. I think there's a world where the Jazz make a trade and they see what Desmond Bane fetches. And maybe it's Lauri Markkanen because they deem that to be the best way forward. Or maybe they find someone to help Lauri Markkanen and be the best player. And Lauri Markkanen can slide to the 2, the second option, that is. I think there's a real possibility that more and more trades happen that are short-sighted, and there's going to be more trades than there have been because of the CBA changes, and teams are going to try to either unload what they got or load up and try to win in a short period, a la what the Raptors did with Kawhi Leonard, and they won in a 1-1. Like, they went 1 of 1. They had one chance with Kawhi Leonard. They won it all. I think you're going to see teams try to say, well, you know what, we're going to have to run this 1 or 2 years together because we're youthful, and then we're going to have to pay this guy, but I'd like to go all in and bring in a Kevin Durant. I think it's possible. And teams are built well enough, and there's enough resources to really make this possible. So I'm very curious to see what happens. Desmond Bane's the first domino. I'm curious to see what happens to the Jazz. Comment below and let me know how the Desmond Bane trade impacts the Utah Jazz. And thank you for making Locked On Jazz your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the 2025 Locked On NBA mock draft, a 5-episode series, the first with the most comprehensive NBA draft analysis from the NBA experts to college experts, and then even more, the NBA draft experts complementing the NBA experts. So find the 2025 Locked On NBA mock draft on NBA Big Board and Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And I appreciate you guys for spending time with me, and hope for those of you who listen that are fathers that you guys enjoyed a happy Father's Day.